To receive an update from the Department of Defense's Financial Improvement and Audit Readiness Plan. This issue has been a high priority for this committee for some time, and as the September 2017 deadline approaches, we need to understand how much progress has been made and what obstacles lie ahead. The Department of Defense is the largest single entity of the federal government, and it is charged, in my view, with its foremost responsibility. Taxpayers deserve to know that their money is being spent with appropriate checks and controls. That public confidence is essential as the men and women of DoD work to safeguard our nation. The processes which enable annual audits also enable better decision-making by the Department and by this committee, which will be of growing importance in this dynamic, complex threat environment. The fiscal year 2010 NDAA codified the requirement that the Department be fully audit ready by September 2017. In 2011, this committee's panel on defense financial management and auditability reform, led by Mr. Conaway, made a number of findings and recommendations that have been incorporated and in some cases executed by the Office of the Comptroller. Many significant challenges have been identified and undoubtedly more will be uncovered. The chances of success are greatest when the Department, the services, and other DoD organizations resolve with this committee to overcome those obstacles, whatever they may be. We look forward to discussing the progress made by the Department in executing the plan, how successes have allowed the plan to move forward, and where lessons learned from prior missteps have altered that plan. The committee remains dedicated to keeping the Department on its course toward fiscal responsibility in being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. I yield to the distinguished ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with everything you said. I'll submit my statement for the record and just be brief and say that it is enormously important that we get to the September goal of next year and have the full ability to audit the Department of Defense. We've worked on this committee a great deal on acquisition reform, which is all part of how do we spend our money more wisely, but the greater transparency that we have with how the Department of Defense spends all of its money, the more efficiently we are going to spend that money, and the better we can understand how to conduct oversight properly. And the time has come for us to achieve that goal. I thank Mr. Conaway for his leadership on this issue, and I look forward to your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. We're pleased to welcome the Undersecretary of Defense, Honorable Mike McCord, as well as Honorable Robert Spear, Assistant Secretary of the Army, Honorable Susan Rayburn, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and Honorable Ricardo Aguilera, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, all for financial management and comptrollers of their individual departments. Without objection, any written statements you'd like to submit will be made part of the record. And Mr. McCord, you're recognized for any comments you'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Smith, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to update you on DoD's audit readiness. I appreciate your support for our efforts and especially want to commend the contributions of Congressman Conaway. He led your committee's panel on audit oversight, as you mentioned, which played a key role in focusing the Department's efforts and continues to keep us on the right path. Inside the Department, achieving auditability is an important part of Secretary Carter's reform agenda. You might remember when he testified before this committee in March, he laid out his plan to ensure we're ready for the future as well as ready today. There was really four major parts that I talk about when we describe his strategy. First, it's connecting the Department to the full spectrum of American technological innovation. That's probably the most noted. Second is Force of the Future initiatives to find new ways to attract and retain the best people. Third is innovation in the way we think operationally, including planning and wargaming. And then fourth is reforming how we do business, which is where audit effort and acquisition reform come in on our top priorities. Mr. Chairman, I especially want to recognize your leadership on acquisition reform. The Department greatly appreciates the ability to work with you on that complex issue. While they're important subjects, so we tend to talk about them, the Secretary tends to talk about them one at a time in individual speeches often because they are so important. These efforts are all connected to the Secretary, and therefore they're connected to us. These are our top management priorities, but even as we focus on the 5 strategic challenges, I think the members of this committee know well that the Secretary has described. With me today, as you said, are my colleagues, the Assistant Secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, who have been heading up the military department's efforts to get us audit ready, and I'd like to thank them for their leadership. My office has been the focal point for the overall policy and for defense agency audits, but my colleagues here and their chief management officers in the services have done the heavy lifting that has gotten the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines mobilized for this long endeavor. This audit effort has been a team effort even beyond those that are sitting at this table today. I also want to highlight the contributions from the DoD Inspector General, GAO, and OMB. While obviously we respect the independence of the IG and the fact that GAO works for you, not for the executive branch, we've been working together to achieve a common goal, and we've been benefiting from their advice. I'd also like to recognize the DCMO organization inside the DoD who are key partners with us on this effort. Our focus on the audit has yielded substantial and measurable results over the last couple of years. For the first time ever, the military services audited their annual budgets for FY15. Combined with the successful recurring audits of other parts of the department that we've had for several years, about 90% of our FY15 budget was audited. Those audits did not produce a clean opinion the first time out for the services, but still we learned a great deal from our initial effort, and we'll be back at it for FY16, back at it for FY17. We are putting the contracts in place now to enable us to audit our full financial statements in FY18 as planned according to the common goal that we have. For those of you who don't work with these terms regularly, I just want to clarify briefly that a financial audit is different from a program audit. There are hundreds of audits done by inspector generals usually in DoD in any one year. A financial audit examines our financial and business processes, and a successful audit confirms that the information on the financial statements is clearly and fairly presented. A financial statement audit does not necessarily tell you that those funds were spent wisely. That's part of the joint responsibility that we both have that is separate from the audit itself. The absence of a clean opinion does not equal waste, fraud, and abuse, nor does having a clean opinion prevent there being waste, fraud, or abuse. The lack of an audit opinion means that your systems and controls don't meet audit standards. We're working hard to change that, and substantial progress has been made, especially in the last 5 years. Fixing the audit findings that we do have continues to be our biggest priority. My written statement, as well as the report that we provide to this committee twice a year, the FIAR plan report, gives you more detail on the nature of the challenges and how we're addressing the specifics. The good news is that we now have, because of the audits that these services have done, have a baseline of auditor findings that provides an independent assessment of where the problems are, as opposed to our own assessments of where the problems are, and helps us focus our efforts. Preparing our huge global enterprise for its first full audit is a challenging task. Our department, as the Chairman noted, is not just another federal agency. In terms of the scope of our resources, our responsibilities, and complexity, we are more like an economy. Indeed, each of my colleagues here individually is responsible for the financial management of annual resources that exceed the GDP of about 100 of the member nations of the IMF. While this is a major management challenge, we have a sound plan on the audit. We're sticking to it. We're making progress, and we are fully committed to getting it done. I thank the members of this committee for your leadership and support. I'm proud of the progress we've made, and I'm confident the Department's on the right track to achieve a positive opinion.
Great. Mr. Spear?
Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of this committee, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Army status, efforts, and accomplishments towards achieving auditable financial statements. In addition, I want to convey to you that Secretary of the Army Fanning, Chief of Staff Milley, and the Undersecretary and Chief Management Officer Murphy and I are committed to improving the Army's financial management and meeting the requirements to be audit ready by September 2017. It's good to be here this week as we celebrate the Army and the Army Financial Management Corps' 241st birthday. These birthdays recognize the contributions and long-standing, outstanding traditions and customs and excellence of both. Unfortunately, our history does not include being audit ready. It's not yet in our DNA. However, we are changing and building a culture of accountability and understanding audit. It is not easy to drive this significant change. Yet despite the operational and fiscal challenges the Army faces, our soldiers and civilians remain dedicated to improving the business processes and using our resources efficiently and effectively as we generate readiness. The current fiscal environment and operational demands present a unique challenge for audit readiness. However, this environment also affords us the opportunity to evaluate technology, organizations, and training as well as our business processes. We see the value to being auditable. Such information of accountable stewardship have never been more important than they are today. The Army's financial improvement plan for achieving our audit readiness milestones includes an iterative external audits and examinations by independent public accounting firms, or an IPA, to inform and focus our Army's audit efforts. These audits and exams provide us feedback on areas requiring additional corrective actions and focus our efforts to improve progress towards a financial statement audit. The independent public accounting firms completed an audit in 2015 on our scheduled budgetary activities. Although we received a disclaimer, the accounting firm was able to complete the audit and provided the Army valuable feedback. In response, the Army has developed corrective action plans, and we are in the midst of remediating and implementing those recommendations. We are also repeating a similar audit in 2016. Clearly, important to achieving success is leadership involvement. As such, our Undersecretary of the Army chairs our Enterprise Audit Committee. He increased the frequencies of these meetings from quarterly to monthly. During these meetings, we monitor the progress of those corrective action plans, and we hold leaders accountable for where they're attaining and meeting milestones. We also hold senior executives responsible and accountable for achieving their audit readiness milestones with inclusion of financial improvement metrics in their annual performance assessments. Audits have indicated we need to improve and enforce our systems of access controls. The Army continues to achieve success with our Enterprise Resource Planning System. The General Fund Enterprise Business System, known as GFIBS, is our core business and accounting system. GFIBS enables the Army's audit readiness progress while simultaneously modernizing and improving the Army's business processes. The Global Combat Support System, Army, and the Logistics Modernization Program, our retail and wholesale supply systems, respectively, effectively complement the auditable features achieved in GFIBS. The future delivery of the Integrated Pay Personnel System, Army, will be important to sustaining the audit. But more importantly, they also provide effective total human resource and pay operations. Finally, our dedicated team of professionals is our most important and valuable resource to achieving audit readiness. Under a program Congress approved, we are implementing DoD-based certification program. Our committed management workforce has improved their skills with nearly 90% having achieved certification. In summary, we continue to improve across all business areas. Our annual exams have expanded in size and scope while providing valuable insights to remediation while we develop a culture of auditability. The strong commitment of leaders and dedicated workforce is the Army's greatest asset and will enable us to achieve our goals. I sincerely look forward to continuing our work with members of this committee, GAO, and DoD to ensure that we continue to achieve success and reach our goal of financial audit readiness. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rayburn?
Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity today to discuss the Department of Navy's progress towards auditability. After years of preparation, we eagerly entered the audit environment along with Army and Air Force as private sector accountants began an engagement on Navy's fiscal year 15 schedule of budgetary activity. The disclaimer we received at the end of our inaugural audit was not unexpected given other government agencies' experience. Our Navy team endured the rigors of a first-year audit, learned a great deal, and our department-wide team is aggressively tackling the deficiencies the auditors identified. We're on course, navigating toward an audit of all Department of Navy financial statements in FY18. I'd like to begin by noting our successes. Navy Command's produced on time over 95% of the documentation requested by the auditors. Given the global magnitude of that effort, their careful preparation, teamwork, and dedication to task were clearly demonstrated. We have an aggressive enterprise-wide approach to correcting deficiencies. A flag officer or senior executive has been appointed to remediate each finding. I personally monitor progress, demanding sustainable corrective action while preparing for full audit in 18. Characteristically, the Marine Corps is aggressively moving out ahead. The Marine Corps has been under audit for several cycles now and has made great progress in improving its business environment, strengthening its accountability through increased compliance with accounting standards. The Marines have provided many lessons learned for the other services to follow. We expect them to stay on present course, asserting auditability on all 4 financial statements at the end of 2016, a year ahead of the congressional mandate to do so. While I remain optimistic, I don't want to minimize the challenges we're facing. The auditors found significant internal control weaknesses in our systems, business processes, and in the statement compilation process. These findings make it absolutely imperative that we immediately strengthen internal control environments in every one of our business systems. The first-year audit identified 220 major deficiencies, 82% of them related to IT system weaknesses. Simply stated, we have too many systems, and most of them were not originally configured to conform to auditability standards. To overcome these challenges, we're taking several actions. First, we will continue to downsize our current suite of systems, eliminating redundant capabilities. During the implementation of Navy ERP, almost 100 business systems were eliminated. We now plan to reduce the number of General Fund Department of Navy accounting systems from 3 to 2, while eliminating all other non-auditable legacy systems, avoiding maintenance costs and streamlining IT controls. Second, during our audit readiness preparations, we discovered that we could not guarantee the integrity of the data resident in many of our systems. Auditors identified ineffective controls over access and security and noted that we often failed to ensure proper separation of duties among users. The audit highlighted these weaknesses, and systems managers are now strengthening those controls in earnest, ensuring and documenting compliance. Third, we're putting procedures in place that will identify and document every accounting adjustment made throughout the year, requiring all Navy organizations to record and retain documentation supporting every adjustment. At the same time, we're identifying the root causes of these adjustments with the goal to eliminate them at every step in every business process. Fourth, we're working with our primary service provider, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, to strengthen controls governing their compilation of our departmental financial statements. DFAS has undergone an independent assessment of the controls for which they're responsible, and they're addressing deficiencies which contribute to statement inaccuracies, including unsupported accounting adjustments created in their processes. Our collaboration is demonstrating the need for a well-documented business partnership in which roles and responsibilities are clearly understood and adhered to on a daily basis. Finally, we've confirmed what we've long suspected: absolute, uncompromising protection of business and financial data generated by classified programs challenges the efficiency of the audit process. For the first-year audit, DoD classification authorities restricted the number of data elements that were shared with IG audit teams. This restriction increased sample sizes, resulting in a larger volume of documentation that Navy organizations were required to produce and limiting the auditor's ability to analyze transaction data. We are revisiting this issue with urgency, mindful that the solution must ensure protection of these very important programs, which serve as a cornerstone of our national security. Beyond our near-term emphasis on the 15 SBA audit results, we have identified actions necessary for the audit of all our financial statements in FY18, and we are aggressively tackling them as an enterprise. Our approach is consistent with DoD guidance, emphasizing a line-by-line survey of each statement with a focus on beginning balances. Over and above the implementation of effective tools that will allow Navy to sustain the gains already made, I believe that the greatest positive contribution to come from the first-year audit has been within the Department of Navy culture. Audit deficiencies now receive the highest level of visibility and attention, including Secretary Mabus, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Audit is now a talking point at every level of the department, from senior flag officers and civilians to the most junior personnel, and an integral part of the department-wide manager's internal control program. As we attend to the detailed work that will ultimately result in a clean opinion, we remind ourselves not to lose sight of the real objective. Complying with audit standards will result in greater accountability for the public funds appropriated for the Navy and Marine Corps' critical contribution to the defense of this nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aguilera.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Smith, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to address this issue with the committee. I want to share our progress and challenges towards achieving the audit readiness mandate. We have a strong support from across the enterprise. We're continuing to embed auditability in our way of doing business. We have a governance structure that's actively engaged in monitoring our progress and assessing roadblocks and the challenges when they arrive. The 2015 Schedule of Budgetary Activity audit has reinforced that we're on the right track regarding our approach to balancing our checkbook, reconciling our universe of transactions, and implementing information technology controls. We're actively applying the lessons learned from the 2015 SBA audit as we prepare for the full financial statement audit. Overall, we're pleased with our progress. We've received positive feedback from our auditors. We're focused on the critical tasks that remain to get us to full auditability, and we're addressing the following key challenges at this stage. Number one, reconciling our universe of transactions. Many of our transactions rest in legacy systems. For the SBA audit, we've reconciled 45 of those systems, and we're adding an additional 28 systems that need to be reconciled for the full financial statement audit. These reconciliations are heavily logistics related and require more effort than our financial systems and represent 1/3 of our system's effort. Two, we're institutionalizing our IT control discipline. 73% of our IT notice of findings and recommendations in the SBA audit were related to compliance with existing internal controls. These findings represent a significant change to our management efforts, and we're addressing that through training and field support. Additionally, we're applying lessons learned from our SBA notice of findings and recommendations to all of our systems to prepare for the full financial statement audit. Three, to complete our asset valuation activities. The FASAB and OSD have issued valuation policies that we need. The new policies align with our military equipment methodology, and we're well underway with that valuation effort. Our teams are working with both existence and completeness and the valuation of real property, among other things, and should complete their work in the fall. Four, we want to accelerate the progress that we're making in our Air Force Working Capital Funds area. The bottom line is that the Air Force Working Capital Funds effort started later than our general funds effort, but we've established a solid team led by our Air Force Materiel Command and are quickly closing the gap with our progress on the general fund side. DFAS has helped us by establishing a dedicated team to support the Working Capital Fund effort, and we're leveraging the lessons learned from the general fund to accelerate our progress. We fully expect that Working Capital Fund to be on par with the general fund by the end of this fiscal year. And five, we're going to continue with the rollout of the Defense Enterprise Accounting and Management System, or DEAMS. We recently reported to the Congress that DEAMS is in a critical change status. Ironically, it's precisely the audit control attributes of this enterprise resource planning, or ERP system, that have created the challenges for our users. We opted to retain the front-end audit controls that made this Oracle commercial solution successful in the private sector, but this has required a significant focus of change management as we shift our audit controls from the end of the financial process to the beginning. We're beginning to see success from this approach as our user community has developed new ways to embed auditability in their daily work. We actively include these lessons in the critical change plan that's currently being developed. So in summary, the Air Force is fully committed to being audit ready in September of 2017. We expect there to be challenges over the next year of preparation, and based on the history of other federal agencies, we expect the timeline to achieve an unmodified opinion of our financial statements to take many years. However, the process of preparing for an audit has led to significant improvements in our financial operations, and we fully expect that trend to continue. Again, thank you for your leadership and your support on this issue.
Thank you. Mr. McCord, Mr. Smith, and I have all acknowledged leadership, persistent leadership of Mr. Conaway on this area, and I want to yield my question time to him.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And I want to thank the Chairman as well. Full committee slots hearings are finite, and I appreciate him dedicating one to this issue. And I also want to thank collectively your teams and all those hundreds and hundreds of folks behind you that do this heavy lift. It is hard, it's complicated, and there's just a lot of it, and I appreciate that. One thing that does concern me is on the future horizon is a change in administration, which everyone knows is going to happen. A couple of aspects of that. One, how do we make sure the new team coming in is properly briefed and understands exactly where we are, and they then also through the Senate confirm how important this issue is to keep it going, keep it on track, and then also comments that what are the risks of the existing political leadership going on autopilot over the last 4 months of the administration and not finishing strong, and then properly resourced the overall efforts given these budget strains and the shrink in the Department of Defense budgets. Can you talk to us a little bit about the resourcing of this, and then in the Senate NDAA, there's a Section 811 that would make structural changes as with respect to many of the organizations, putting them under a new system. My personal view is that would complicate an already difficult circumstances. So any comments you'd have on that as well. So if we just go down the line and speak to us about the change in leadership and the risks to keeping this momentum going.
Thank you, Mr. Conaway. We've already had a couple meetings led by the Deputy Secretary on transition. It's too early for us to actually communicate with the two candidates under the law, but as soon as that is possible, starting probably in August, we'll be providing information on an equal basis to either side that wants it, and then obviously at a higher level in November once there is a president-elect. So we're going to be ready for that. We are focused first and foremost, per the Secretary and the Deputy, on our day jobs of executing the mission today, but we are very focused also that we are going to be ready to do a solid transition. I will tell you that when I came in with the previous team, the transition was pretty much about the budget, because when you arrive as the comptroller, there's a budget that has been left to the 80% mark, say, and the new administration has to come make their priorities and finish it off and submit it. So that dominated the transition materials that we received 8 years ago. There was very little on this subject, and we're going to do a much better job of making sure that the new team is aware of this issue, which has moved a good bit in the 8 years since then. Obviously, we can't speak to what the new folks, what the new team, what priority they might place on this issue, or whether they might come in and decide that our strategy doesn't make sense to them. We have followed the same strategy for years, and we've benefited from the support of this committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee to be able to follow one strategy for a number of years. I think is a key element of why we have made progress. But it's not a given that the new team will decide that what we're doing makes sense. We'll certainly try and present them all the facts and make our case as to why they should continue to implement the strategy that we've laid out. With respect to resources, obviously that's something we can talk about. The constrained resources are a strain on a number of subjects, as is the mandate to reduce headquarters personnel by 25%. All of us and all of our teams are headquarters people by definition. It's a headquarters function that we do, and so we're trying to deal with the budget uncertainty of the current climate and do this at the same time. Final point, and we'd be happy to expand on this, maybe not to use all of your time later. The administration is concerned, the department is concerned, the Secretary is concerned, as the statement of administration policy on the Senate bill says, with the enormous scope of the management changes, many of which we see as unhelpful in the Senate bill, coming, especially in the acquisition realm, a year after there were already significant changes in last year's NDAA on this subject. One of particular concern to me, the Senate bill moves DFAS out from under the CFO, disrupts what I see as an end-to-end financial management process that I think should be under the CFO. But that's only one of the many changes which we think are excessive in the Senate bill, and the Secretary will be happy to communicate, as again the SAP does, some of the concerns we have about the many changes being thrown at us right as there's a transition of administrations under the Senate bill.
I'd like to take that also, and first of all, I'd like to take this opportunity too, Congressman Conaway. You came and sat down with us in our group in terms of leadership a couple years ago, and I think we saw the interest over here, and I think the interest here in the push here will keep leadership focused. They can't speak to the incoming political leadership that will come into, but the culture and how I said it's not in our DNA, but we're starting to build that. We're starting to build it within our leadership, the understanding the value of the audit, the understanding that the resources produce outcomes, and tying the resources to the outcomes that we're also trying to do through the audit. And if we can better show better data for decision making, so we're doing that. If I got to point out the Corps of Engineers went about this back in early 2000. They achieved a successful audit now for about 8 years in a row now. I stole their leader. He's sitting behind me here. Mr. Wes Miller was the leader who led and guided that. I brought him in, so when I walk out the door, that type of leadership remains. They understand what it takes to get to audit. They understand the importance of the control of the environment and what the education and training of a dedicated workforce is. So I think that will be significantly important to the sustainment of it and bringing it to that. but also understanding that the value of good, solid, timely, and accurate information is what part of the is being brought right now to the senior executives as well as the generals within that part. I think the current involvement of the current political leadership, as Secretary McCord mentioned, in the fall, Secretary Work is going to pull us back together and ensure where we are, that we're still on track before we head into the end of the year. And I think that drive will keep us focused through this part, and then the folks who are behind us will also do so. And I look forward for the continued involvement of this committee and yourself to also come back on over and meet with folks to identify the value of what their stewardship provides to outcomes.
With regard to the three parts of your question, first with regard to the transition, I really have taken a very strong stand about embedding the change within the careerists, the civilian side, and the active duty. They will be those who carry through not only this transition, but others in the future. I learned my lesson about this when I was the Assistant Director and Chief Financial Officer of the FBI. It was about embedding into the DNA in those who would carry on the lessons learned, the business practices, the changes, and I do believe we have done that. I went through the same challenge as the Chief Financial Officer of the U.S. Customs Service when it was integrated into the Department of Homeland Security. Again, it was about embedding into, as my colleague from Army likes to say, the DNA. And once you have that embedded, it becomes just a part of the fiber of the organization, and I do believe we are doing that. With regard to resources, I would echo Mr. McCord's comments about the headquarters reductions, so I won't belabor that. I would just echo it very strongly. We are part of the headquarters reductions, and we have a team in place that's actively doing very important and very positive business. With regard to resources, the other thing I would say is we need stability. We need stability with regard to resourcing, especially as the op tempo of the fleet has been so demanding and has taken a toll. So it's a very careful balance of our resources with regard to the emphasis we place on audit and the very expensive audit requirements that our IT system changes require, and the maintenance of the fleet so that it can fight the fight. With regard to structural changes, I would again echo Mr. McCord and say that I believe any structural changes at this point would be very disruptive. We now have in place those systems, the people, the processes. It's taken us years to get to that point, and I do believe that structural changes at this point would be adverse to our progress. Thank you.
And sir, again, let me echo my thanks for your leadership in this issue. And working with this committee, we would look forward to doing that as we continue to get to audit readiness. The three parts of your question substantially have been answered. I would echo the comments that have been put forward by my colleagues. I would offer with the Air Force, the commitment that I see is, as a former auditor, what I would think is almost irreversible. I'm really pleased when I go into senior level decision-making meetings on the audit, and I'm sitting side by side with my counterparts in the personnel arena, in the civil engineering community, in the logistics community, and to see their commitment in getting all of their areas, all of their portfolios ready for audit as well. So in terms of momentum, I feel as though in the Air Force it's almost irreversible and baked into the DNA, as Mr. Spear said. So in terms of transition, I would echo my comments of my colleagues with that in particular. Resources, again, I believe headquarters reductions have allowed us to move, have not been favorable to us, but have not impeded us in the SBA audit, but we would look towards stability. We'd want to see more stability, signals of more stability in the future. And any structural changes that the NDAA on the Senate side might be proposing, again, I would echo, we have all of the equipment we believe that we need, and anything more than that would be disruptive to our efforts.
Well, thank you for your answers, and appreciate that. One quick anecdote. About a year and a half ago, I was aboard the USS Texas and taking a tour of the submarine. I was doing a mini town hall meeting in the galley, and a young seaman out of nowhere asked me, said, Congressman, how's that audit thing working? And I don't know if you guys planted that question or what, but it gave me some comfort that the importance of this is working its way down through the uniform service piece of this, and appreciate the hard work. There are a lot of trials and tribulations between here and where we all want to get to, and I appreciate what your team has gotten us to this point. With that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence, and I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate your all being here. I know this is difficult, time-consuming, but important, and so you've really represented that. I wonder, particularly, Secretary Rabin, if you could speak a little bit more. You talked about the procedures documenting the root causes. Can you go from your perspective and having been on this in other lateral moves, I think, what you see as the root causes? You did talk about the DNA, basically the culture of the organization. What more can you tell us about those root causes and how you're getting at that?
I would be delighted to do that. From my point of view, regardless of the organization where I've had the honor to serve, it's about recognizing the operational mission of the organization and that is what's driving the people who work there. So when I was at the FBI, we were tackling some very difficult issues. Suffice it to say, audit was not the number one thought on every FBI agent's mind every day. So it was about teaching them, using their own language, what we were trying to do, so that we would be able to identify areas of redundancy and find ways to get them additional resources by eliminating those bad practices. One of the things that I have learned as I've come back now to the Department of Navy is that first it's about the mindset. So again, it goes to speaking to people in their own language. Once you do that, as my colleagues have indicated, it really becomes part of their DNA. So if you're talking to a nuclear submariner and you speak to that nuclear submariner about an operational inspection and you talk about the audit in those terms, they have an aha moment. And they tackle it in exactly the same way that they would tackle that zero defect mindset at sea. So much of what I would say is the answer to your question is the root cause is that we are warfighting organizations. We're not accustomed to this. The systems that were developed years and decades ago by very well-intentioned people were not developed with the audit in mind. The other thing that I would add has to do with the creation of the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. The migration of talent to DFAS has allowed them to perform the functions that they provide as our support service, but at the same time it was a loss of talent from the Department of Navy. So in an environment where it's a competition for talent, it's a buyer's market. So we are all, my colleagues, the IGs, the private sector firms, are competing for the same talent. So the initiatives that may be on some of your minds to help us with that kind of direct hiring authority and those kinds of things will be very welcome. So that's just the tip of the iceberg from my point of view as to the root causes. And if I haven't answered your question, I'd be glad to provide more information.
Mm-hmm. I know that you're looking to find the best people to fill positions. And you need authorities to do that, especially to be able to hire perhaps on a fast track, if you will, when you see people who have the talent to be able to progress towards or to enter into a separate area. And that may raise questions as well, because you're saying as you're talking to people in the language that they understand best, in fact, when you're trying to get somebody, even from a different discipline in some cases, how does that work? And how have you found that to be helpful?
I will tell you frankly that much of it has to do with a sense of providing an important service to the security of our nation. So if we're talking about recruiting young people, I found this in every organization where I had the honor to serve. They want to serve this mission. They want to serve, but they also are, especially the generation that's coming up, just graduating from college, they have a different sort of mentality about moving from job to job to job. So we have to open our minds to allowing them to grow in that process, be willing to hire them, train them, track them, and bring them back by appealing to that sense of service to a higher cause.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think what I'm learning, and I think what you've all shared, is that really wasn't the way people performed in the past, particularly in leadership positions. So I think that we'd like to give you that opportunity, those authorities, so to understand that better and and to get at what sort of has held a lot of people back in the past, and maybe women, young people, and people of color perhaps as well. And I think that's critically important. So I appreciate your dealing with that. I'm going to go ahead and I think turn it just back to the chairman. I wondered if there's any other guidance that you've implemented regarding actions to resolve financial weaknesses within your services. What else have you all found in terms of the accurate reporting? What is it? Is there something else that you can address within this area, where you've gotten guidance and been able to use that or not use that perhaps in the past?
Yeah, I can take parts of that. One is there's no real quick fix to the material weaknesses and the weaknesses that we found. You've got to make it something sustainable. And so quite often in the past, we tried to do a checkbook mentality, check the block, fix it, and move on, but it wasn't really fixed. So you've got to go to the root causes you talked about and see why either a control's not working, and look at more holistic end-to-end. And quite often what we did is we turned to the resource manager or the comptroller and said, it's your responsibility. But we didn't bring in, as my colleague said, what the mission and the outcomes were supposed to be along the way. And that's really where the material weakness is embedded. So you got to fix the control environment. You got to train and make sure people are properly to do their job. And then you got to hold them accountable. And then you've got to make sure they get the proper feedback and the mechanisms that within the tools. Going back to early 2000s, the tools weren't in place. The systems weren't in place. So they didn't allow the internal controls. And so between the systems, the improvement in internal controls, with people knowing and understanding their job and being properly trained across the board, we're removing the material weaknesses. They tie around the total process, not just financial management. Human resources, logistics, running of installations all feed into the financial statements. And quite often the material weakness is embedded in the outcome of how people perform their mission, and they weren't even doing it how they had defined how they're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And so we think now we've tied those two together, and people better understand that the resources we give them is to those outcomes, and that as long as they're trained properly with the proper tools and given the ability to do it, they'll execute properly.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it back to the chairman at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlelady. Mr. Franks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I am especially mindful of the fact that this effort to move toward a more auditable services posture is in large measure due to your leadership, and I think this gives a lot of us a great credibility. But I especially want to point out that there's probably no one on this dais that has the knowledge and the understanding of just the entire audit philosophy and mechanism in general than one Mike Conway. He's far ahead of all of us, and I think that the effort that we're involved in here is going to give many of us trying to advocate for a stronger military budget a lot more firepower. And I really appreciate all that's being done here, and I suppose many of us here recognize the profound impact this sequester has had on the military. And I hope that this process that we're involved in right now will really help us in the debate going forward to turn back some of that, in my judgment, unwise policy. So with that, I just have some, again, very simple questions. And I'll address Mr. McCord. Mr. McCord, how long has, I should just say, how has the plan changed over time as you've executed? What has significantly changed since 2005 or since 2009, respectively?
Thank you, Mr. Franks. The main change that really my predecessor, Bob Hale, made in 2009 was to focus first and foremost on the budgetary side, which is the information that people use to manage most. The thought process was that this would get it into people's heads quicker, that this is information, that doing this audit effort will help you manage better. And I think there's a key psychological part there, and the Marine Corps I think, has demonstrated that they got this first and foremost ahead of everyone else maybe, is that when you stop thinking of audit as something like eating your vegetables that you're doing only because someone told you it's good for you, but you don't quite get it yourself that you want to do it, and then you approach it mentally as a chore as opposed to getting the buy-in that, oh, this is actually going to help me run my organization better. That is the big breakthrough I think that the Marine Corps made in being the first service out there. And I think that having the budget be the first, the annual budget that we get from Congress be the first thing we focused on auditing enabled that mental leap to people connect the audit effort with goodness for themselves, goodness for their organization, and being able to be on top of their own resources better. Subsequent to that time, we really haven't changed the plan significantly very much. When I succeeded Mr. Hale, my thought was to keep the plan as long as I saw that it was working. I still believe that it is. The main new information now, of course, is that each of my colleagues here in each of the military departments has had each of the services has had an independent audit now. So we have somebody else, an independent company, independent audit firm, telling them what to need to work on. And so, of course, we're reacting to that now. And Dr. Rayburn mentioned the large number that the Navy had, for example, but many of those were the same thing repeated a bunch of times, so it wasn't as bad as it sounds that there was 200 different problems, but there were many cases of the same problem. So the focus now naturally shifts to, as you go from years of planning to get this done and preparing to get this done to actually being in it and having the independent firms tell you where you're weak, that is necessarily going to focus us on the specific things that the independent firms have now said, you need to fix this the next time I come back, because in general it will be the same firm that comes back the next year. Obviously, they're going to be looking to see if you corrected the deficiency that they identified the first time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I've already made the point that I think this is a significant moment, and that your leadership and that of Mike Conaway will be a legacy both for the military and for each of you. And so I just ask the last question, just a quick thought. If there's anyone there on the panel that would suggest if there's one thing Congress and this committee could do to assist you in the endeavor to ensure its success, what would that be?
I would say that, I think I may repeat a comment I made briefly earlier, that I think the ability to work with this committee and your partners in the Senate to follow pretty much the same plan for a couple of years in a row now, 4 or 5 years, has really helped us a lot, and that's something that I would request that unless you, obviously in your judgment, if you think that we're not going in the right direction, then of course we need to talk about changing the plan. But if you think we are, to let us continue to kind of move in the direction that we are, I think that's been of enormous help to us. Budget instability, obviously we all want that to be fixed, and that is something that requires the entire body, to get together to figure out how to deal with sequester. That's an enormous drain on the time and mental energy of leadership, not just in the FM community, but the secretary, the deputy. That's a larger problem that weighs on us and is a big distractor. But
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you.
Thank you. Ms. Hartzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to echo the words of my colleague, appreciation for the leadership of the chairman and Mike Conaway on this. This is a vital project that you are embarked on, and I want to thank you all for your tireless efforts. And this isn't just about spreadsheets and the mundane parts of accounting here. This directly impacts the readiness of your soldiers. And we are fighting a fight here to try to ensure that our men and women have the resources they need. We're facing a readiness crisis. We've had cuts to our defense, and many of us here in this room have been advocating for more dollars to be invested in to address the threats in the world. But time and time again, we are facing challenges here by people saying, well, the DoD can't have an audit, so they don't. If they can't audit, then why should we give any more money? And so this is putting men and women's lives at risk, and it is imperative that we get this done, certainly by next September, but sooner better. And I enjoyed hearing your testimony. I appreciate, especially Dr. Rayburn, you're getting prescriptive and telling what you're doing after the results, the steps. Some of them I jotted down. You've decreased the number of systems by 100, the accounting systems. That makes sense. If they're not, everybody's operating on a different accounting system, they're not talking, they can't guarantee the security. We need a documentation for every adjustment. Makes sense. Unsupported documentation. I wanted to ask about the classified problem. It just seems offhand that you could have auditors who are specifically of the classified level to do that portion. Is it as simple as that, or what do we need to do to address the classified problem?
I'll describe it as generically as I can for obvious reasons. Some of it has to do with what I referred to in terms of the competition for talent. So to have people who, first of all, are able to obtain the level of security clearance that's required is very time-consuming. So there are very few things more disheartening than having one or two people who are allowed access to these programs for one of either the IG or the independent audit firm, then leave to take another job. So that's one component. The other component has to do with ensuring the protection for the information within those systems. And I probably should not elaborate beyond that. I'd be happy to come by and talk with you in greater detail about that. It is something that has brought the financial community, intelligence communities to a point where now I think we're starting to have the discussions that will allow us to protect the integrity of the data, but also provide meaningful information so that the auditors can conclude that the opinion is well earned.
Well, keep up the great work. Mr. Spear, I didn't hear in your testimony, but I was involved in a couple other things as you were talking here, so maybe I missed it. But did you get as prescriptive as Dr. Rayburn did, listing specifically what needs to be done to be able to do an audit and what you're working on? Could you outline 5 of those things that you specifically are working on again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry if I get passionate about it too, because it's more than 5. Along the same lines, we had 290 corrective actions that we're working right now.
90?
290. 290 findings that were from the auditors, of which were shared between us and DFAS, and we're working those corrective actions already. We've got a good portion of those already underway or already corrected. Many of them were very similar across, as Mike McCord said, to where you'll find them in one system, but they're iterative across all systems, and then we needed to fix, for instance, access control, the similar access control in one system. We had similarly, had when we filled it, our general fund enterprise business system had over 200 systems. We're down to 70. We got actually down to 60, but a couple grew back. And the way they grow back is you have minor micro applications being applied. So those are examples of definitive type things. The other piece of it is just training. Part of the aspect of getting at it is that we found folks are not necessarily intentionally doing the wrong thing, and that there's not standardized across. So as the auditors identify those, they weren't necessarily notice of findings, but we found that, for instance, our commands needed additional training in some of the aspects that they do. So we're focusing training towards those as we go through. I would like to also go back to what we found in terms of I think each of us saw this problem, and you got to it in terms of the sensitive activities or classified data. It's not only the training on that and the access from the auditors, but it's also the case to where as we reduce the number of systems, the good part of having bad systems was nobody could see and couldn't aggregate the sensitive activity that was going on in there. Well, as we start reducing and make very transparent type systems in the audits, that's one of the things in terms of keeping the data classified we're having to go. So one of the things that the Army will be asking for help for and continuing is support of some of our additional systems called GFIB sensitive activities that we're fielding is very necessary to sustain the audit. And so we've added people at classified programs to be able to do manual sorts through the data. And that's very important, and it's enabled us to get through. So, not only reducing the number of systems, training, getting at the corrective actions plans, understanding how to aggregate the data so the auditors can get that was one of the challenges we all got to, called universe of transactions. And then lastly, the reconciliation of where the manual processes are. What we found is that everybody focused a lot on the system, but didn't look at the manual controls. And a lot of the manual controls were some of the things from lessons learned that we found that individuals were non-standardized and were not keeping sustained across the commands. So we've got a heavy effort right now going through under our optimization effort to standardize those business processes across it so we can better align the training and make sure for policy, we then update the policy to make sure folks understand what is expected of them across those and that leaders then make sure that it'll be done properly within their business areas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Gibson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the panelists. This is certainly a very important hearing, and we've heard time and again how important this is to the integrity of all of our efforts, this reform. And I want to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Conaway. Years ago, I spent 3 years on the faculty at West Point, and among the issue areas that studied and brought highlight to the cadets was the vulnerabilities, the challenges of transition. So, I appreciated the remarks that you made on that. So much effort has been put into this in recent years, and it really needs to be successful. And knowing that we have this period of vulnerability or challenge, and the fact that leadership is putting effort against that is encouraging. Towards that end, assuming we get there, in 17, what's been done to SOPs and software systems to ensure that we stay there once we get there? So, what comes to mind is, oftentimes when you bring a new endeavor forward and you're working on something online, you'll have to fill out a series of boxes and submit. And you submit, and it's missing 2 categories. It stops you. You don't even get accepted. You have to go back and you get a red box that says you haven't done this. So, assuming we get there, what have we done to our code, our software systems, so that, even down at the battalion task force level, although I know that that's generally not the problem, but as we work at our financial officers across the DoD, as they enter in data, that they'll get stopped and have to provide full view of things before they go forward. I guess we can start with the DoD and go to the services. I'm really just interested, assuming we get there, what have we done to SOPs and software systems that once we get to a full audit, that as we bring on new, it's often the case in the services that you change jobs about every year or 2. What have we done in the superstructure to make sure that we don't get off track going forward?
I guess at our level, Mr. Gibson, we primarily approach that as management practices to make sure we stay on track. I'd probably have to get you, for the record, a more specific software answer. I'm not a software expert myself, but the primary focus that we have is on making sure that procedures, both holding managers accountable in their performance ratings and those systems that we set up, are going to sustain the effort. But I'd have to get back to you, for the record, on a software-specific coding.
I have a couple of what I consider to be really good examples, one for Marine Corps and one for Navy. As you peel back the layers of these processes, as you've described, it's amazing what you find. Just recently, the Marine Corps realized that they had coded an automated system for separations that was, for lack of a better word, foolproof. So, as you described, stop you here, you can't go further until you do it right. And what we discovered as we respond to audit is they had reinserted a human being into the process, which was then adding errors. So they have modified the SOPs. No longer is a human being allowed to interfere with the hard coding in those systems. That's one example. For the Navy, we've learned as a result of the findings of our first-year audit that we had hundreds of instances of a supply system. So every ship had developed their own version of a system. So right now we have a flag officer reporting to me every other week on the progress to get to one system where the coding will not allow any other changes to be made. So that's kind of where we're at. And again, I would say I applaud the efforts of the independent audit firms in helping us find these things, and holding people accountable for fixing them is what's going to get us there.
Well, thank you. That's exactly the kind of response I was looking for. Mr. McCord, what I'd recommend is, and I've got scars on my, in my past or my body it'd probably be worthwhile to sort of capture these points across the services because so much effort has been put into getting, and I certainly, Mr. McCord, I certainly understand your point. You're not going to micromanage this. You're going to manage practices and people. But, the services are really learning some hard lessons in this to make sure that we stay on track. And I think it would be worthwhile to have a repository of best practices so that we can socialize that across all the services.
Your point's well taken, Mr. Gibson.
Yeah, can I add one thing to that? Because, jumping on that earlier, but first of all, we're deficient in it. One of the findings from the auditors was the documentation was insufficient. We thought that in the ERP environment, we had fixed a lot of it and found that there's still the human in the loop, and that we had not properly documented, and or where documented, there were more than one instance and it wasn't standard. So part of what we're trying to do right now is make a repository through knowledge management as part of our effort right now of ongoing, one of our corrective actions, is to provide where those SOPs and where those standard business practices are. And so we've got as one of the efforts to be done within the next 6 months to do so. We have found that there are best practices amongst the different commands, and we're using that to streamline and identify where those best practices are. As part, again, I point to Mr. Wes Miller. He had done that at the Corps of Engineers, and so we're trying to do that. And it's not all automated, though. What you find is that a lot of the SOPs over time, they exist, but folks have gotten away from using either those tactics, techniques, and procedures and SOPs, and getting back now out of a deployed environment. They had gone to what had worked for them in a deployed environment, and now we're trying to identify where those and make sure the policies direct them to it. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank all the panelists, and Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. My time has expired.
Thank you. Mr. McCord, I've got a few questions, but if the other three of you have something to add, I don't mean to exclude you. So any doubt, Mr. McCord, that DoD will be ready to meet the statutory deadline of being audit ready by September 30th, 2017?
We're pretty confident that we're on the path to get there. Obviously, on that date, there will, absent some very unusual series of events, be different people holding these jobs who will actually be the ones to make the assertions at that time. As I alluded to briefly before, we will be the contracting to hire the independent firms to make that deadline has to take place near the end of our watch this year. And so I think the confluence of timing will work pretty well. The Deputy Secretary is going to get us together again in the fall about the time that we will be able to transition, if you pardon the use of the word there, to move from talking to both candidates to talking to the President-elect will be about the time frame where we'll need to make those decisions. So we might be able to have a little overlap with the next team to say, here's what we see, we think we're ready to go, we want to push the button and go on contract in the fall of 2016 to start the process for the fall of 2017. We might be able to have enough interaction to have an informed decision that next team will have some ability to comment on. Otherwise, we'll just make the best decision, of course, that we're able to based on our information this fall on our watch.
Okay. I think Dr. Rayburn said that as they analyzed the weaknesses so far, 82% of the problems were related to IT weaknesses. At least I wrote that down. So that leads me to have a question. Are we going to get a bill or a budget request from DoD or any of the services to have a big IT purchase or upgrade in order to comply with that deadline?
I would say in general, no. There will be specific examples. There have been, and there may continue to be. We're working now on an omnibus reprogramming. There may be examples where we ask for a specific amount to fix a particular thing, but as Dr. Rayburn alluded to, changing systems at this point is not in the cards, not of any of us to do kind of a fundamental throw this out, start something new. That's not at all what we think. We think that we have the systems that are going to work for us, and there may be tweaks needed, but not fundamental change-outs.
If I could just add to perhaps calm your fears, of the 220 findings, 149 will be remediated by the 30th of this month. This goes to Mr. McCord's comment about the redundancy of some of the findings. We're also being very harsh with our systems owners. It's about eliminating systems. It's not about anything other than that unless we find ourselves with no alternative. So we would only come back if we find ourselves in that place. And I would say I'm very excited about the pace of learning as folks in uniform and our civilians learn how to respond rapidly to this new environment.
Well, and I don't know nearly as much about this as Mr. Conaway or y'all. What my memory is, when we've talked about this before, is part of the problem was business systems that didn't talk to each other have created part of the difficulty in getting to an audit. So that's part of the reason I ask, okay, are we on track to have this thing work together, or are there going to be big expenditures? But you have made me feel better. And I presume y'all don't have a substantially different answer for the Army or the Air Force.
I don't have a substantially different answer, but we do need the funding that we requested to the modernization of the systems we do have. For instance, our integrated pay personnel system helps sustain the audit. It helps eliminate hundreds of human resource systems to allow the integrity of the data within that. But it also improves the ability to look at the total force and allows us to integrate the personnel pay of our military folks into that. We have a single and fully fielded now general fund enterprise business system throughout the Army, and we won't be asking for a new one. We do have funding that we requested for the sensitive activities I mentioned earlier, which allows us to protect the classified data that we didn't see. We didn't realize that these transparent open systems back 8 years ago would allow people to see what was going on in the classified community. And so those are the limited types of things, but not new financial systems that is not coming down the pipe.
Okay. Anything different for the Air Force?
In the Air Force, there are no new financial systems, but the critical change process that we're undergoing right now for the Defense Enterprise Accounting and Management System teams, we'll be able to give you a full report at the end of July on what's required for that system going forward.
In other words, it's possible y'all may have more budget requests.
Right now, it looks like probably reorganizing within the budget for that. So perhaps a reprogramming of some kind.
Okay. Ma'am, do you have something else?
I'm sorry, I would be remiss if I did not credit the Marine Corps. Because the Marine Corps has been so far ahead of Navy, we have had lessons learned, and included in that is the use of Marine Corps systems that have passed the audit and having the Navy start using those systems. We have at least one very good example of that, and we're hoping we'll find others.
Okay. Can that extend to the other services, do you think?
Absolutely.
Are y'all willing to look at a Marine Corps system?
I can really look at it. We did look at it. We looked at it before we went to General Fund Enterprise Business System, and now we fully fielded the system. It's more modern and capable also. So part of the issue we all have is the feeder systems that feed it from other non-financials. And we've got to get rid of some of those interfaces that feed that are hard to maintain. So that's part of what we're reducing within the General Fund Enterprise Business System. Our system's fully compliant, so I think GFIBS is the right answer for us, and it's integrated with the rest of already logistics modernization and our global combat support system, which provides our other logistical support.
Okay. Just saying it's okay to look across to other services when appropriate. Mr. McCord, one of the questions as y'all were talking about having these independent agencies evaluate your systems was, for me at least, do you believe DoD can internally rectify all of the issues that they identified? Or are there situations where an outside entity can help correct some of the weaknesses that have been identified?
I think that we are and need to be open to outside input. And when I mentioned in my opening statement that we've been meeting I've been meeting with Gene Dodaro, the head of GAO, on a periodic basis, with OMB officials present, with the Inspector General present the last time we met. Many of these folks have experience from other agencies that have seen things before that we haven't gotten to that yet. And I found this with the OMB folks, for example, that have useful insights for us In addition, some of the things, again, from having that broad view, GAO has the same ability to inform us with things that they've seen with advice, and we've tried to get them to be more partners with us, recognizing that they do have to stand apart from us at the same time a little bit. We also have, I guess I lost my train of thought here. We have to learn from what the independent auditors say. One of the concerns that we have is that the scope of what we do may make it hard to get audit firms on contract with us for the scale of work that we have to do. As you know, they're the so-called Big Four. Two of those firms really aren't doing audits right now. They are doing the consulting side, which makes it hard for them to then be independent auditors. And so having sort of two of them in and two of them out constrains us already. The amount of work that we have, I mean, it would be attractive work, I think, given the size of it, but it's also, you know, there's limited number of people that can handle the size of the work that we do, and that will be one of the concerns we have, is sort of the capacity of independent firms that have this outside expertise to work with us.
Okay. Again, my memory may be fuzzy, but I recall that in some of our past discussions that there was concern about the DoD agencies being able to get audit ready, and that some of their issues might even affect whether the services were ready. Can you address that?
Yes, that's a fair observation. The fourth estate, as we call it, the defense agencies in general are not as far ahead as my colleagues here in the military departments are. Some of them are, and that's not a blanket statement, because there's about 24 of them. Some of them have been passing an audit for years. Defense Finance and Accounting Service, as an entity in and of itself, has passed an audit. I believe it's 14 or 15 times in a row now. But there are many that have never done so and are not as far along as the services. That is correct. The strategy that we're following and we've described in our plan is we're basically, as you might expect, taking the biggest and most important ones first, the most material in audit terminology. So that would be the ones that are business-like, DISA, DLA, the ones that you would probably expect. Two combatant commands, SOCOM because they are service-like and control their own funds, TRANSCOM because they are a business-like entity, and then our defense health agencies. So those are kind of the biggest ones that we're focused on first, and then we will move to smaller and smaller ones as we go. Ideally, and this gets back to the sort of the auditor capacity point I was making, ideally you might like to have just one firm audit all of that, but because people have these consulting relationships, some of them are sort of conflicted out, that can't. It'd be hard to find a firm that has no consulting relationship with any of 24 defense agencies. That argues against bundling them all together, which would make it easier contractually, maybe to get a handle on them as one entity. So that's kind of the tension that we have. The Inspector General, if I could speak for them on this point, would prefer to have as, you know, one big contract, or maybe one contract just for all defense agencies. We don't think we're going to be able to do it that way because of the need to get independence and have people that haven't consulted for SOCOM, say. So we can't have any package that includes SOCOM, you know, no one would bid on it that's done any consulting. So that's a tension we have, but we do recognize, you're correct, Mr. Chairman, that we have some work to do on the fourth estate to catch up to where the services are, all of whom, as we said, have done an audit of their full budget this year, which only some of the defense agencies could claim that.
And I think finally for me at this moment, there have been press reports, and I don't mean to pick on anybody in particular, but I think it was DLA had some, had bought some things and you know, lost track of how many it had or disposed of various items, and obviously it's an enormous enterprise. I'm trying to get to the question of what an audit gets us. And so in the case, just taking that hypothetical example, if DLA is able to pass an audit, should it theoretically be possible then that someone could go and keep track of what they buy, where it is, how it's disposed of, and, you know, with any of the items for which they're responsible?
The way I would respond is one of the most important benefits of audit is cleaning up the way you do business to attempt to go into audit and attempt to get a clean opinion. So it's almost a trite-sounding phrase, that it's the journey as well as the destination. It's what the cleaning up your operation.
The systems and processes necessary to get to a clean audit, right?
Necessary even to show up for the audit, and especially necessary to pass the audit.
Yeah.
Then provide that better information about your organization. Doesn't mean that, for example, there couldn't be fraud, right? Someone could collude to alter the records and steal a piece of equipment. That can happen whether you're passing an audit or not, but it reduces the chances. Having better controls means you're more likely to catch any particular thing. And again, I think Susan Rayburn could maybe comment from the Marine Corps experience as the service that went first, that was where the light bulb went on, I think, first with the Marines is the things that I have to do to get in the game for audit and to pass an audit allow me to run my business better, increase the chances that I will find ways to redirect resources within my own organization from things that are lower priorities or things where I can find efficiencies. It does help you run the business better. Dr. Rayburn may want to give some example from the Marine Corps particularly.
I don't know whether I would emphasize the Marine Corps examples because I feel I have some other examples that might be better. So with apologies, the things that come to mind really are my experience at the FBI. And I would say that the work we have done is hard, it's labor intensive, we've made amazing progress. But that said, there's a lot of really hard work ahead of us, and the thing that I worry most about has to do with assets. So when you're talking about the Navy, it's a capital intensive institution, as was the FBI. So when you're asking people to count and cost things, that becomes very, very difficult. And to your DLA example, these are massive enterprises, and so having the IT systems that are ready, sustainable, permanent, eliminating the bad business practices, those are the things that are going to be the next very steep learning curve that we all have to climb. The other thing I would add is with regard to the other agencies, to elaborate on Mr. McCord's comments, in addition to the clean opinions that he cited for the state entities, we have the issue of what's called the SSAE 16 reports, and this really goes to the nature of service being provided to the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. So we have been working together in a very collaborative way, first with DFAS as our ready partner. We've made tremendous progress with them, and we're tackling those similar kinds of things with the other elements of the Fourth Estate.
Well, I'd just comment finally. I think the way you started, Mr. McCord, the way you started out your comments, it's important to say what an audit is and what it's not, and what it enables managers to do, which to me is the key thing. So that's part of the reason for that question. Mr. Conaway had another question. I yield to him.
Real quickly, and Mr. Spear, you mentioned it. One of the recommendations out of the 2012 audit panel was that performance evaluation documents include specific items as to what needs to be accomplished for the next year. And you mentioned that you've baked that into the Army's evaluation system. I'd be interested if the other agencies, other services have done the same thing with respect to their personnel. And then on an annual basis, have we actually, obviously I'm not going to say who, but have you actually disciplined anyone who failed to meet the standard that was set in their, ahead of their evaluation? So, Mr. Spear, any experience with actually using the evaluations to improve performance?
Yeah, I can't definitively say what the outcomes of a specific individual was. I just know that we're now monitoring. There's incorporated in each of the senior executives' performance plans. So it should be, if they're not maintaining and achieving that objective that's in their performance plan, it will impact both in terms of their feedback as well as their performance and their performance-based evaluation, where they receive monetary compensation or otherwise for it. And we certainly can go back and see if there's, whether it's within some of those. We talk about it, we certainly provide feedback on it to individuals, and we provide feedback to individual commands. We then go through, and as I said, in the audit committees, monitor and provide commands feedback as how the individual commands are doing for feedback to those performance statements.
Ms. Rayburn, Dr. Rayburn.
Specifically answering a question, have we held anybody accountable? Yes, we have. 2 examples I would be happy to talk with you about privately. It's all about sending the message that this is serious business, we mean it, and those who aren't performing, we'll find someone who can. The time is of the essence. We have to have people who can do this job. It's not fair to anyone to have someone in the job who can't do it, and it's not fair to those around them. So the answer to your question is yes, sir, we have.
All right, thank you. Ms. Aguilera.
And I echo the comments. Yeah, our SES Corps also has those audit requirements in their performance evaluations. I don't know of any particular instance where we've had to discipline anyone. I can get that for the record. But I'd also like to comment on the and commend the department for the FM certification program to elevate the level of financial management expertise in the entire staff. And all of the services are complying with that, and the Air Force has taken the lead on that. And we're very proud of the achievements of our airmen in that regard as well.
I appreciate that. Mr. McCord, you started down that path about limited resources with respect to audit firms and firms big enough to do the job. In 2018, will there be another firm needed for the overall DoD roll-up, or will that be able to do that with, in other words, how are you going to do the consolidation, in effect, of all these disparate agencies under one roof? Is that a different firm?
I guess the challenge is I think that would be helpful, and we would desire it, but we can't create the supply, right? I mean, if the 2 firms, the 2 of the big 4 firms that aren't in that business right now choose not to, to bid, then we will have to do it another way. And one possibility is to have, not probably the real likely possibility is to have the Government Accountability Office do the audit. That's something that we've discussed a little bit. If we can't get a public firm to do it, I don't think the Inspector General of the Department of Defense has the capacity, or would likely have the capacity, to do the entire thing themselves certainly not with any less IPA support than there is now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're back.
Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just briefly, you talked about the DHA sort of along the list of those agencies, specific areas within the defense that have to be looked at, have to be audited. And I wondered if you could, I mean, there's got to be something that's actually unique from one to the other, I would assume. And is that true, that you're looking at some different things? We've obviously had a number of reports, commissions, et cetera, looking at expenses within the DHA. And as we consolidate that more, or have DHA more as a focus as we look at new ways of making sure that our men and women are covered and their families, is that different? Is that going to add, even in terms of who you bring in to take a look at those, knowing that we have many private entities as well within healthcare? How do you see that moving forward? Where will that fit? And there's also a concern about retention for the services as we look at healthcare. Can you just very briefly, and we can look at this again, I'm just wondering how that fits in, obviously, within the Personnel Committee, and trying to continue and work with you as you move forward in that area.
Ms. Davis, as you know, the management of the health enterprise is on the table, I believe, in both authorization bills.
Right.
So that we recognize that is something that may be coming. I don't see that right now altering our audit strategy for DHA, but it's something we would take a look at depending on how this comes out at the end of the year in the final NDAA. But yes, I do recognize we have, of course, a number of years we've had changes in TRICARE that we requested that have been agreed sometimes in part and sometimes not. But then there's a more fundamental management change that's on the table this time. Again, I don't see that, though, having us. It needs to be audited, however it's run, however it's managed. It needs to be audited. So I think that we're going to probably press ahead, basically, unless we see the management changes would require us to do something else. But at this time, I think that we would probably stick with the plan of having the DHA be one of those core defense agencies, along with DLA, DISA, that are the first things that we need to get done. In terms of having the whole department be audited, you cannot overlook the biggest defense agencies. There is an agency here or there that is so small and specialized, maybe the folks that assist in the POW MIA effort, that you could possibly pass an audit if they would be so small. But DHA is not one of those, right? So I think that we're going to probably just continue to press unless we see that the management changes that might ensue out of the NDA or otherwise would cause us to revisit, but I don't anticipate that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lamborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and excuse me for being late. I was in another committee having a markup on a number of bills, but thank you for having this hearing. And I hope I'm not duplicating anything that may have been asked or answered earlier. In fact, I know this is related, not the same, but related to what Representative Conaway was just asking you about. But this is for any one of you. In your written statement, you identified that auditors found noncompliance with IT controls to be an issue. You cite that remediation actions have focused on the accreditation processes for these systems, yet in reality, these are typically one-time activities that are then valid for several years. Your stated course of action does not address the human aspect of this noncompliance. So, why are administrators throughout the enterprise not removing users' access when they leave an organization? Are administrators receiving additional training or losing their privileges? This is a huge vulnerability that our adversaries can and most likely have exploited.
I'll take that one on first because, I'll tell you, I even had a false sense of security. We implemented a brand new ERP across Department of the Army and GFIBs, and the control mechanisms, and we had documented as to what folks needed to do in terms of access controls. But again, the human in the loop wasn't enforcing it. So we brought folks together and we found out what was wrong, and we're now identifying both the further controls to ensure it's being done properly. And we found not only had that not been done inside of that ERP, the feeder systems. So when we talked earlier about having multiple findings, we had 290 findings in the Army. Of the findings, 32% of our findings from the audit of the SBA dealt with systems. So many of those were duplicates across. And so we have to go through and now start putting in the regular checks to make sure folks are in fact clearing people out when they out process. Many of those are manual processes that individuals have to make sure they're done. But some of those are just making sure, again, that their standard processes are understood, they're being held accountable for those, and that who has to hold those folks accountable. And so we're putting a re-emphasis focus on those. Those many of the control mechanisms that we talk about that are being violated when the auditors came through.
I would just add 4 points. We are, in fact, removing access in those cases where we find that it is necessary and required. I would just echo your concern about the exploitability of this problem, and it is imperative that we get it fixed at every turn. We're standardizing our SOPs and requiring adherence to those SOPs. And then the final point I would make is that in every case, we are holding a flag officer or an SES career civilian accountable for the correction.
And as a follow-up, although I'll wait back, I'll stand back and wait, Mr. Aguilera or Mr. McCord, if you have something to add, and then I have a follow-up.
I would just echo the comments. We're pursuing a lot of the same policies.
Okay.
Not all of them have to do with, not all of those notice of findings and recommendations have to do with ghost employees that are still logging onto systems. Also things like the person, separation of duties, the person who enters an obligation isn't the same person that approves the obligation. So we're taking steps in those arenas as well.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. McCord, do you have anything to add?
No, not on this one.
Okay, and then my follow-up question then is, did you find any of the departments more susceptible to this kind of lack of compliance or not? Are you able to comment on that? Or was it the same across the board?
The IT issues were pretty similar across the three. It was a major finding in every case.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And witnesses, thank you for your testimony today, and thank you for your service to the nation. The need to improve business and financial oversight and transparency in the Department of Defense will help support efficiencies in your operations and strengthen controls to deter waste, fraud, and abuse. This is something that the American people will hold us as their elected representatives accountable for, and so we must hold you all accountable for it. And I know that the department is committed to full financial audit readiness by September the 30th, 2017. So over the next 15 months, DoD will be preparing its financial statements for a full audit. And what I would like to ask, and I hope that this question has not been asked and answered, I'm just arriving at the hearing. I had prior business, so I apologize for not being here to listen to all of the testimony and questions and answers. But if punitive actions are taken by Congress, do you believe that this will help ensure the future preparation and readiness of the Department of Defense for an audit, or will it hinder it? And I'll ask each one of you that question.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Johnson. When you say punitive actions, I guess the first thing that comes to mind to me are the several versions of what's been called Audit the Pentagon Act that have been introduced in the House or Senate over the last couple of Congresses. And often the penalty or the stick in those bills is to take funding away from a department or some part of a department that doesn't have a clean opinion and give it maybe, and there might be a carrot aspect where the money would flow to someone that has a better audit performance. And the fundamental concern I have about that is that each of our military departments or each of our parts of the department has a mission to perform, and taking funding away from them because of their audit performance or lack of audit performance doesn't change the fact that they still have a mission to do. And on the flip side, to give money to make up an example, to give money to DITRA because DITRA passed an audit over and above what they request and what they need, to me is not a good use of taxpayer resources either. I mean, I understand that money is an incentive in life, but the biggest stick that has been out there in the various iterations of this bill has been to take money or to take milestone authority or to make acquisition decisions harder is the other one. But similarly, I mean, the reason that we have these programs and the reason that we request funding for particular agencies within the department is because they have a mission to perform, and I would sort of hate to divorce the funding. You know, you should evaluate that on the merits of whether you think that what DITRA or some other part of the agency is doing is needed or not needed based on requirements, not based on as a reward for performance, as important as it is on the audit.
Understand. Any of the other witnesses have anything to add to that?
No, I would add the same thing to that. I think it's more holding accountable instead of disincentivizing, because I think some of the I'll call them punitive measures or disincentives. It's like failing a class and then saying, well, you don't go to class then. The people who need the funding to be able to fix and rectify some things are some of the folks we'll be pulling the funding from and completing the mission they need to. I think we definitely need to hold a level of accountability, both in terms of what this committee is doing to us right now, is identifying and then recognizing those folks who do achieve and providing some sort of incentive to do so and providing the value of what they need to do. I think that some of the things we've seen in there in terms of those, for instance, I can't do the work without DFAS. Taking DFAS away from the Department of Defense would not help us.
All right.
We need to share the responsibility for those things, identify what's not being done, then rectify those things.
All right.
I would echo my colleagues, but I would add that these kinds of punitive actions would potentially further degrade readiness at a time when our operational tempo is quite severe. And the last thing I would say is I believe it would demoralize our workforce who have worked so hard to get us to the point where we are now.
All right. Mr. Aguilas.
I would echo the comments already made. It would damage readiness. And then, as I've said before, as an auditor, I've been heartened by seeing the cooperation among the different communities in the Air Force, civil engineers, logisticians, engaged in our auditability. And so punitive actions like that would actually retard the whole audit process because they wouldn't have the manpower, they wouldn't have the resources available to them to help us reach audit. So in the end, it would actually set us back. So.
All right, thank you, and I yield back.
My understanding is there are no more questions. So I want to thank y'all for being here. I think it's important to also express appreciation for the progress that's been made so far. It seems that we went a long time with fits and starts and restarts on this audit issue, but now we are making progress. And I think that's credit to the leadership of the department and especially to the people y'all work with every day. And I know you'll understand if we work to continue to hold the department's feet to the fire, that we meet the statutory requirement and can ultimately have a successful audit. As we talked about, it's important for public confidence, it's important for better decision-making, and so there's a lot that stems from the controls and systems that are put in place when you can have a successful audit. So again, thank y'all for being here and answering our questions, and we'll look forward to further conversations on this in the future. Hearing stands adjourned.